mute everyone else.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for allowing me to speak. I am Heidi Roper. I work for ViewHR, which is an employment law and HR consultancy which are based in Ringwood. I've been working with them for just over a year now. They have been operating for about 4 years. I normally work part-time, but I'm actually working full-time at the moment because we have so much work available to us. We are trying to be as expert as we can on the furlough scheme and all of the coronavirus legislation guidance and principles that are coming out. As Matthew said, they are changing rapidly. I gave a talk yesterday morning on the Salisbury Chamber, and then obviously yesterday lunchtime we had some new information coming out. So I'm constantly trying to update myself and be up to date as much as I can. So the idea of today's session is really to help understand what your legal implications are when it comes to using the furlough scheme, talk about holiday in a specific point, because just to make sure that you're using the rules and guidelines around holiday appropriately, and then look at the kind of returning from furlough perspective, which is challenging and changing. Obviously we were gearing up for coming back at the 1st of July. Now we're gearing up for a partial comeback in August from the furlough scheme. So changing all the time, but obviously we as a business just want to try and support people to come back. One of the key things that we're doing is trying to help people define the practicalities in as much of a way as they can, so that they have the headspace free to think about the bigger picture activities that they need to be kind of taking stock of right now. So really happy to have questions and really happy to kind of support anybody. I'll be talking a little bit more about the specific support we're offering. So I've seen a couple of questions, but I can't actually see them on the share screen, so I'll come to them at the end unless there's anything specific. Matthew, maybe you can call out if there's anything specific you need me to look at now. So the job retention scheme, as we know it, lovely furlough, it is an American term specifically used because it's not in relation to UK employment law. It doesn't apply to any of the existing laws that we've had in practice before. It's completely new. However, all of the existing UK employment legislation is operating as per usual, aside to the job retention scheme. A couple of things that I'd like everyone to kind of just make sure that you're doing and operating is ensuring that you have agreement with your employees that they are on furlough, monitoring the dates and having a physical document, whether it's, or should I say, a document that's stored either online or a physical document regarding the dates from and to for your furlough periods. Make sure that you're keeping your furlough documents for 5 years. That's a different period than normal HR documentation is kept for. So just calling out that it's 5 years, and make sure you're storing your documentation in a GDPR compliant way. That 5 years, I think, is the period of time that HMRC have decided that they will need to go and audit the claims. I don't think that's a standard for any other reason. So make sure you're keeping your documentation for 5 years. Remember, each of your furlough periods needs to be 3 weeks long. So you can furlough somebody for 3 weeks, have them back for a day or a week or whatever it is. But in order to claim for another furlough period, they must be on furlough for another consecutive period of 3 weeks. We are encouraging everybody that we work with to keep in touch with their employees whilst on furlough. And I'm probably being overcautious, but I just believe that keeping records of those interactions might be a sensible decision as well, just in case there are any claims for unfair dismissal or anything that come up later on. Just keep a record of those communications that you're having. If it's just an email, just store a record of the email, just to make sure that you've got some confirmation and backup of those conversations that you've been having. The other thing, I'll come on to it a little bit later as well, but understanding your cost position during and post the job retention scheme is key. I know a lot of you will be looking at cost more than anything, because that's a very tangible demand and need for you right now. But making sure that you've got the money for redundancy costs and accrued holiday and all of those kind of things in place, they must be going into your cost position forecasts right now. But like I said, I'll come on to that a little bit. And then any changes that you're looking to make, those changes take time. And so planning those changes is a really key factor. When you're looking at returning to work, you may not be able to return all of your workforce. So those consultation periods for redundancies, those kind of things, they all take time. So they need to go into your planning scheme. So I'll come on to that a little bit again. So those are just the kind of key legal points as it comes to furlough. I've probably rushed through them, but I'm imagining that most people are fairly aware of those things already. Holiday is a funny issue, that there's some guidance, there's some legislative statement, and then there are some gaps. So I just wanted to run through that with everybody just to kind of help you understand the position as it stands as of right now. So holiday is accrued during the furlough period. So everybody will be continuing to accrue their holiday as per usual. Holiday can be taken during furlough, but it must be paid at 100%. So you can, I don't know anybody that really loves the idea of using holiday during furlough because they can't go anywhere at the minute, but maybe now people will start wanting to take a few days holiday to kind of increase their pay by 100% as we've gone on with the 80% fee. The legislation has been passed to amend the Working Time Directive, which is a really key thing that I think has kind of gone unnoticed by many. This is allowing employees to carry over their holiday for up to 2 years. So that cost accrual from this year could potentially extend into next year and the following year. So it's something to kind of keep an eye on. So there is a legal directive now that you are allowed to carry over holiday for 2 years under the Working Time Directive changes due to coronavirus. That's the legally entitled holiday period, not the additional holiday that companies may offer. So those are just the points that the 20 days that you have to take, plus the bank holidays. Bank holidays should either be taken and paid at 100% or added into the holiday entitlement. So last month we had a few bank holidays. This month we're having a few bank holidays. Those bank holidays should be paid at 100%. So if you haven't done so, you need to either retrospectively top those up, or you need to allow people to carry those bank holidays over into their ongoing holiday allowance. There are no formal guidance statements regarding enforcement of holiday during furlough leave. And this is a key point. Some businesses are enforcing their employees to take holiday whilst they're on furlough. There are risks associated with that because, like I say, there is no legislation stating that this is an appropriate or acceptable action. We're advising all of our clients to encourage employees to use up holiday rather than enforce, another E word, promoting the benefits of taking holiday, related to the 100% pay, but also to the fact that it supports business survival because you're taking accrued cost out of the business today. And I think the clients that we've worked with, about 80% of them have encouraged their employees to take holiday, and about 90% of those employees have agreed with little debate when they've been put forward the statement that actually we're trying to reduce the ongoing cost accruals in the business and you get paid 100%. So whilst it costs you something now, it reduces that continuing over into the next couple of years. And then just to kind of a watch out really, when you return to kind of normal work, holiday is going to be a fairly contentious issue, I believe. People will want to take it, not want to take it, want to carry it over, not want to carry it over. And you as a business obviously have to operate in a way that you want people to be in the business and back at 100% from day one, because obviously you've not been operating for a significant period of time. You want your employees working and you want them working to the maximum capability that they can. So managing that holiday decision now, whilst you've got the furlough period in place, is a sensible practice to be taking as far as we are recommending anyway within our business. So this is kind of transferring now onto what do we do to get people back into the office. And the practical side of it, I think, is what is causing a lot of headache for a lot of businesses, because there are so many red tape and statements coming from the government about what you need to do in order to make your workplace safe and how you manage that. So I've just listed here all of the really practical things that you need to consider and need to put in place prior to people returning back to work, and hopefully this will be helpful. We're suggesting phased returns for every site in every shape, and you can phase anybody's return how you choose from furlough. But what we're suggesting is that you bring in certain people on certain days and build that up over a period of time to test your infrastructure and to test your model and to test your office. I think it would be fairly dangerous to bring everybody back and just see how social distancing goes and how the new operation works from day one. So bringing people in gently and getting used to the new normal is a really sensible approach. Like I say, social distancing is going to be in place for the foreseeable future. So looking at your workplace configurations, what PPE you need, making sure that you've got the right risk assessments in place, making sure those risk assessments are for office, for site, for travelling employees, whatever employee base you have, you need to have a risk assessment in place to ensure that you are doing the best job that you can to ensure that those employees are safe in all of your different working environments. That there will be an increased request for workplace flexibility and working from home, and there probably is a benefit for most businesses to operate this, obviously, if it's worked and the infrastructure works and it's sustainable for your business. So looking at how you implement that is going to be critical and key. Who you say yes to, who you say no to, why you are making those yes and no decisions are important to make sure you're documenting your operating in a fair and equitable way, and you're making the right kind of the decisions without any form of discrimination. Making sure that you are saying no in the appropriate way as well, and making sure that you're being fair and equitable in that respect. And also making sure that you've got the right policies and practices in place. Home working for many businesses has been an ad hoc statement rather than a normal. So if you are now operating a normal working from home process, then a policy needs to be put in place to make sure that you are putting your employee safety first and making sure that you have the right requirements in place. Also looking at how you performance manage as well when working from home is really key. So that's a much bigger piece, but just thinking about that now before you start that implementation is a really good decision. A lot of companies have travelling workforce, whether that be to and from work or whether that be for work. And both of those need consideration when you're bringing people back. Obviously transportation, I don't know if you've seen the bus pictures today that are horrifying in London with thousands of people crowding into tubes and buses and all of those things. Obviously we're lucky we don't have quite the same kind of infrastructure here, and most people use their vehicles or walk if they're local. But actually just making sure that our employees are safe coming to and from work, and also then making sure that the workplace is safe when they arrive at work. So if they have been on the bus, making sure you've got the infrastructure in place that they are able to wash their hands and clean themselves, perhaps change their clothes prior to entering the workplace if you have a kitchen facility, those kind of things. Thinking about that transition from public transport to work is quite key. Also the kind of business travel piece. If you have a travelling workforce, do you want them out on the road? How are they going to be on the road? How are they going to be communicating and connecting with people on the street? Where do they stop for their rest breaks? How do they fill up for fuel? What kind of infrastructure do you have in place for that? So there's loads of considerations around that. And this will all come into your risk assessment if you're doing your risk assessment properly. Then we have the ongoing issue of shielding and childcare. We've seen that some schools may potentially be opening as of June 1st. For the younger children and some childminders, I for one have a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old, and my friends and I have been talking about the fact that our babies are going to be the sacrificial lambs to see whether it works going back to school or not, which makes us incredibly terrified. So there will be some of us that won't be sending our kids back to school as of June 1st, where we'll be watching what happens and making sure that our children are safe. So how do you manage ongoing shielding and childcare issues? Shielding and childcare are both allowable reasons for your employees to be furloughed. So it may be that you consider extending furlough for those people first over the others, but then you have to make sure that you're being fair and equitable and making sure you're not discriminating against others on the basis of that. So considering those factors when you're making the decision about who comes back and when. Then we've got a whole big piece here, which I'm not going to touch on because I'm not a mental health and wellbeing expert. We have lots of people that are able to support us with that in our community, but people will not have had the same experience whilst they are on leave for furlough or working from home, and you can't expect them to be coming back all motivated and G'd up and excited to come back to work. People will have had very different experiences, and so understanding that through some form of kind of pulse survey might be a good way to make sure that you put the right infrastructure in place to bring people back in the right way and to motivate and engage them in a way that is beneficial to your business, because fundamentally you want everybody to be as positive and motivated and engaged as possible to help your business survive. Sorry, I feel like I'm just rattling on, so I'm just going to carry on, but I apologise if this is just too much information. Policy changes. So your sickness absence policy will need an amendment based on the existing situation. You potentially need to look at your whistleblowing policies, because obviously we are being encouraged to whistleblow if businesses are not operating in the right way under the HMRC guidelines. Bereavement leave has recently changed, so that needs to be amended at this point under Jack's law. So you've got extended familial and bereavement leave for those people who lose children. Also, just your bereavement leave policy in general under these circumstances. Do you need to kind of look at implementing something slightly different based on the kind of exposure that we've had to a pandemic and what that will be like in the future? And then your return to work policies. So if you've had somebody off sick with COVID symptoms, do you want them to have had a test? Have they had a test? Are they safe? Are they safe to return? Have they followed the 7 to 14 days required shielding process that they are supposed to be following? All of that needs to be documented in your policy and your return to work process. And then the thing that I'm suggesting, which it may sound a bit cheesy, but actually I think it solves a lot of these problems and kind of also creates a collective solution, is a reintroduction induction. So, you know, when you have a new employee that comes to work, you give them an induction, you tell them who the key people are, you tell them what the key policies are, you tell them where the safety and risk assessment processes are, you tell them where to congregate should there be a fire. A lot of situations and policies and procedures and models have changed during this coronavirus situation. So actually having a back to work, reintroduction, induction, whatever you want to call it, bringing everyone together and telling everybody at the same time what you're doing, how you're operating, what's changed, who the key people are, and what the key processes are that they now need to follow, is a really quick and simple way for making sure that everybody has the same information at the same time. It also is a really good practice in terms of making sure that your employees have got the right information and your risks and liabilities as an employer are reduced because you have communicated effectively, and you can prove that people have attended such an event. So it's a really good way of ticking off a lot of boxes to say that you've done the due diligence and taken the right action as a business. So those are kind of the practical steps. And I will move on to the kind of what I'm trying to do now with this slide, which it may not seem it, but if you've ticked off all those practicalities and you've got all of that kind of tangible worry out of your brain about what steps you need to take, you can actually think about the kind of the bigger picture, and you can think about what you as a boss and as a leader and as a business owner need to do to get your employees working in the best way that you can to secure the survival of your business fundamentally. And then to think about how you pivot, whatever else you're going to be doing later. You need to kind of get those tangible steps and those practicalities out of your brain. So moving on from practical, the people aspect of your business is way more complex than the financial. Looking at short-term working, looking at layoffs, potentially redundancies, looking at how you bring people back from furlough. All of these things are really complex based on your cost model, based on your operating procedures, based on the legal requirements of your specific industry, and making sure that you're tapering and you're phasing those returns in the most economic way for your business. I wish I could just give you all an answer and say, this is how you should do it to make the best way. But actually, for every one of you, you are going to be operating with a slightly different plan. But all of these things are available to you. You can put your employees after furlough on short-term working so that they can work 50% reduction hours, 60% of hours, 70% of hours, 80% of hours. And you have the right to ask them to do that and get agreement, or if it's in your contract, you have the right to enforce that. So you have some control over how you will be bringing those people back from furlough, depending on what the furlough situation is for you and what your employee status is. If you cannot afford all of your employees to come back onto the payroll, and you don't see that that's going to be an option for you in the future, then you can pay your employees notice whilst they are on furlough. So you can have those redundancy consultations and use the furlough period to pay their notice. You can't use that furlough period to pay their redundancy cost, but you can use it to pay their notice. So if you make decisions now about what you're going to do in the future, you can save your business the money of the notice period. So whilst I don't really want everybody to make everyone redundant, you can do it, and there are ways to do it that ensure your survival a little bit more as well. And like I said, the kind of mental health, well-being, morale and engagement piece, it's really complicated, and everybody is going to be so different. Some people are going to be fighting to get back into work and really motivated and really hungry and wanting the business to do really well. And some people are going to be not so motivated, and actually managing that piece is really key to helping your business survive. Also, some tough questions, have you got the right people? Are your people capable of doing what you need them to do? And is this situation kind of forcing you to face those questions and make some challenging decisions about how you move your business forward? So one other little thing is, in April of this year, we had the Good Work Plan employment legislation implemented, where there was 52 pieces of employment law that have changed. And that hasn't been halted, that has come through. So you are now obligated to operate under these new pieces of employment legislation. And most of us have let them kind of go over our head and not even notice them. IR35 was a big thing. They've delayed that till next year. So that's one thing that, we were very aware of IR35 changes coming in. They have delayed that to 2021, but the Good Work Plan employment legislation has not been delayed. It has come into place. And there's a couple of key things. One is that your status as employee, worker or self-employed has been redefined in employment law terms, and this was to manage the Uber and the Google, Uber and the gig economy kind of workers. One is that you have to have a statement of employment terms, whether you're an employee or an agency worker, on day one. And one is that you need to make sure that you're consulting with your employees appropriately. So those are kind of key things that have changed since April, which we need to make sure that we are implementing when we're bringing our employees back or when we're hiring new employees. So I'm really sorry I've taken a little bit longer, Matthew, than my 20 minutes. One final thing to say is that ViewHR have a plan called the COVID People Plan that we are offering to anybody on this call. You can call me up, you have an hour of my time, I give you a list of 20 questions, or 50 questions actually, and then I help you write your short-term, medium-term, long-term action plan that you can go away and implement without anything to do with me. There's no cost, but I just want to help people take this craziness and all of these detail out of their head, put it in a plan, and then they can go and act on it rather than worrying about it. And included in that is risk assessment templates and things like that. So that's it. I will stop sharing.
Well done, Heidi, thank you. If you could just take it, that's it, perfect. So as Heidi kindly offered, there's an opportunity to follow up afterwards, but there is 15 minutes or so of time for anything perhaps more general. If it's more specific to your business, please do make contact with Heidi and take up her kind offer. And her email address is at the top of the chat list. as well as being on that slide. And indeed, the recording and the presentation will be on the NFBP website shortly. But any questions for Heidi? Just rather than press any buttons, just wave your hand. Thank you. Fiona, I think you were there first. Just unmute. We're not unmuted yet, Fiona. That's it.
I've got a new business. Sorry, I'm sitting and I should be sitting better. I've got a new business idea that sort of came about a while ago, but I didn't have time to do it. Obviously, I have more time now. Is there a financial package available for new business ideas carrying forward at this time?
Sorry, Heidi, just unmute.
I can't believe I did that. Sorry. I heard my children and I was like, oh, I'm going to mute just in case. I believe there is a startup grant available for innovation and something else. I don't know the details of that, I'm afraid. But
startup grant.
Yeah. On the Gov website, you can look for information, and also on the Solent LEP, they have some information on that as well on the Solent LEP page.
Okay. And the other one was that I was talking to a friend of mine, and she's able to apply for a grant because her business that she set up in her garage, which is on her property, I built a kitchen in my garden, which is on my property, was given a rateable value, but then they're not charged for it. So she can apply for one of the grants, but I've fallen through the gaps again because I've never been given a rateable value for my kitchen, although I applied for planning permission from New Forest and was given it, and I'm regularly visited by EHO and all the rest of it. So everybody knows I'm here, but there's all these different businesses that are small businesses that keep falling through all the gaps of the generalisation that they give. Is there anything coming up, or is there anything available?
So it's not really an HR question for Heidi, but certainly...
I can't answer that, sorry.
Right.
You can't, okay. It's just that I was told that there was the New Forest, all the local councils have been given grants by the government for people in my position, but
that's right.
when I look it up, I fall through the gap again.
Yeah, and Matt Callahan just introduced that a bit earlier, but if you could just say that again, Matt.
Yeah, so local authorities are going to be given a pot of discretionary funding money to pick up some of the businesses that have fallen between the cracks on the business grants announced to date, specifically those that are related to business rates. What we're waiting from government at the moment is what discretionary actually means and what that looks like and who that funding can be applied to. So at the moment, I don't have that level of detail about which businesses will be able to benefit from that funding, but we anticipate that announcement coming out in the coming few days.
Okay, and that will be businesses that don't have a rateable value, yeah?
It will be either an extension of the current businesses that do have a rateable value and or those that have no rateable value. But again, we're waiting for the guidance on what that looks like.
Okay, because the other thing that I wasn't quite sure about was why I was never given a rateable value, because I fall into the same bracket as my friend does, but she was and I wasn't. So it's just didn't know whether there was a...
Yeah, can I ask you to take that up with Matt maybe offline, because we've
got absolutely.
We've got 2 minutes left on HR for anyone. I think Sharon, did you have your hand up earlier? And then we'll go to Neil. So just unmute.
So for staff that are already on furlough, as the programme extends itself into the summer potentially, and we can't get back to normal work, face-to-face work, how much notice do I have to give staff that is going to continue, say, into June or July, etc.?
So in your letter that you've originally given them, you would normally have told them an amount of time that you would expect them to come back to work, which is normally 24 hours. Legitimately, you can leave it up to 24 hours to then inform them that they will not be returning to work as well. However, we're advising that you give as much notice as you have in terms of the planning for them for financial reasons, really. So it's best to give as much as you can, is the kind of official line, really.
Okay, so thank you.
But no legal requirement other than the 24 hours.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And Neil, welcome. And I think you had a question.
Yes, first of all, sorry for not joining right away. I got held up on another call. Heidi, I thought that was really comprehensive, and I did miss some of the early parts of it. So forgive me if you covered this, but it does occur to me that there's an opportunity for employers under the mental health and general well-being to learn from any feedback that they may glean from employees about these different experiences that they've had whilst working from home or having been furloughed. And also in light of, I think it was Twitter today, who have said that people don't need to come into work anymore and can work from home permanently. My point is that there's an opportunity in engaging with employees, I would have thought, and maybe you'd agree or disagree, to inform the business about, have things changed dramatically such that I can now start thinking about new ways of working, different shift patterns, people working more from home than coming into the office?
Absolutely, yes. I think I briefly mentioned it because it's kind of not my area of expertise really, but the mental health and general well-being aspect is so broad, but the idea of some form of pulse survey or something to kind of at least get a basic understanding of where your employees sit right now is a really recommended practice. There are a few really great systems and tools out there, but even just the MailChimp kind of yes, no pulse survey, something at least to get an understanding of how your employees sit. There are some, I'm not sure, Neil, what your job is, but if you have something like that has a, you could recommend to the group would be great. I've just added in the comments, there's a business that I know locally that are doing the Reintroduction, Induction webinar. So they're taking you through how to create one of those webinars and giving you tips on content. And I think it's like £30 to join. So for me, that seems like a no-brainer to kind of go onto that. You get all the slide templates, everything already created, and then you can just roll it out to your teams. And I think in that they're talking a little bit about the surveys that you can do. And I think a better place to work is another great engagement tool that are offering some tips to how to kind of engage with your businesses whilst they're at home. That I don't have any great connections in mental health and wellbeing other than Mind, which we use a lot as a signpost. So if anybody has any, I'd be happy to receive those as well to pass.
Yeah, thank you for that, Heidi. I guess the point was also that as an employer, you can learn from your employees that might also inform the decisions you want to take. You talked about maybe thinking now about laying staff off, but it's also a way of informing the things you need to know to make other decisions about how you perhaps change the way your business works and goes forwards. But it is something we could help with, but perhaps I'll pick up with Matthew on that separately.
Excellent, thank you. Anyone else? Yep, Ian, go for it.
Yes, thank you, Heidi, for that. That was really clear and concise. Thank you so much. My question is concerning statement by Boris Johnson today. There's some videos going around on Twitter as well about COVID secure workplaces. Do you get any sense that there will be any emergency legislation that will go through that will basically enforce employers to ensure that they have COVID secure workspaces in place and all the things around that?
Yeah, there's some guidelines that have come out already regarding what COVID safe workplace looks like. We posted a link to that on our page, so if you connect with me on LinkedIn, you can see the information there. But also we're expecting there to be some more detailed health and safety guidelines and health and safety executive statements regarding what would be expected, because I imagine that they will be then auditing that to make sure that businesses are in place. They're also putting a lot of onus on the business to be responsible for the working environment, which generally leads me to concern that employees will then be reporting employers for not operating in the right way. So I think making sure that you have the right risk assessments and statements in place from day one is a really key task to kind of make it as a priority. So I can't get my words out now. I've spoken too much.
So thank you, Heidi. And we sent out the links to the 8 papers in an extra email yesterday. So you can just click on those if you're your place of work fits one of those categories. So we've got time for just one or two quick any other points you'd like to make, but otherwise please do, can't see any hands up, just do please follow up with Heidi. Just sort of make your offer again so that people understand what it is you're offering.
Yeah, so basically it's an hour session with us. So the details that I've listed in this presentation, we asked you questions about where you stand in terms of your policies, when your policies were last updated, have you got these clauses in your policies, those kind of things, so that we can just do a health check to make sure that your practicalities are in place. And we also then give you some ideas and tips and questions about what you could do going forward to support you with your bigger picture HR activities. And then we give you a little report. It's a bit quick and dirty because we just give you an hour, but we talk about short-term, medium-term, long-term actions that you then can go away and implement, and no obligation to use us for anything other than that session. So it just gives you a roadmap so you can implement some actions.
Thank you very much indeed. So I'll do the conclusion, and then if there's still another 2 minutes, we can let somebody else ask something. But next week, we welcome Dan Tout, local accountancy firm, PKF Francis Clark. There are at least 10 things I listed that he could be talking about. So you've got the civils, you've got the business rates holiday, you've got the retention scheme and the financial accounting side of that, small business grants, you've got the New Forest Rural Resilience Fund, you've got the discretionary fund that we hoping to hear more about shortly. You've got crowdfunder and how you account for that. You've got the bounce back loans, you've got VAT deferral, you've got the self-employed income support scheme, and probably more. There's at least 10 different financial things going on out there. So there is a lot out there. And I just felt it would be useful that you could ask an accountant in the same way that Heidi's kindly set out today, or ask a question, but also maybe something you hadn't quite thought of. So for example, when our grant came in, how do you account for that on your online software package? And do you put it in the right category, and VATable or not, profit or not, and so on? So just all of those kind of questions. Dan is resilient, and he'll be able to take some questions from you next week, and we'll follow up with people afterwards. So we're in the last minute or so. Anyone else? Thank you, Jackie.
This is a question for you, Matthew, and for Matt as well. Matthew, last week or the week before, I can't remember, we were discussing the unclaimed grants that the New Forest District Council had, and you, Matthew, said that you were sort of campaigning or lobbying for that to be reallocated and not to go back to central government. Where are you with that?
Yep, so Matt might be able to update, and certainly Michael Harris as well. We're all on the same page about that this money is already, if you like, in the New Forest. The last thing we want is it to go back. But have we heard it? I mean, it's sort of connected with this grant fund, isn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, not wanting to sort of go on about still waiting for guidance from government, because I sound like a stuck record when I say that, but I think that guidance from government will certainly give us a clearer idea as to whether and to what extent we can reallocate that money, and also any money which we have been given above and beyond, because I think the calculation that government made in the first round of funding was a little bit back of an envelope in terms of using a formula. So anything that we've been overpaid, to what extent we can then put that back into discretionary. But certainly it would be our ambition and our wish that anything that's not allocated, we can then use that in discretionary pot to award to businesses that are willing and needing to take it up.
And I think the two-edged sword, Jackie, is actually the numbers come right down of who hasn't claimed, but it's still somewhere around 400. Is that right, Matt? I think I saw today. So,
yeah, I'm doing quite a lot of work this week to try and identify those and chase those up, but there are still obviously some outstanding for whatever reason.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent. And we're in the last minute, so don't want to hold people up if they're going up to something else. Rob Dewing, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to chuck in. I know, Matthew, you had some frustration applying for the bounce back loan, but I don't know how that's gone in the last sort of 24 hours. But I do know quite a few people who've applied through their banks for bounce back loans. It's been a sort of 10 to 15 minute process to apply for it, and they've actually now got the money in their bank account. So it is fairly straightforward, according to what I'm hearing from quite a few people.
Yeah, maybe that's something we can take up with Dan next week as to why you should perhaps just do it anyway, and why it might make sense to go for that bounce back loan if you can. no, my bank eventually caught up and is now on it, somewhat late to the game. But some banks, I heard of one person who applied at 2 p.m. and had the money in their bank at 10 a.m. the next day. So some banks are getting it right, others are a little slower. But have a look at the bounce back loan. I know it's a loan, not a grant, but just have a think about it, because if it works for you to have, even if you repay it in a year's time, just see what that can do. But it's maybe a good question for Dan, why it's good to have free money even for 12 months. Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. Really appreciate you joining us today, and do let other people know about it. That's the best way this can grow. And thank you again, Heidi, for all that you've done. Your presentation, as a number of people have said, it's never easy to be clear about these things, but you managed it. And if anyone would like to follow up directly with you and with your kind offer, I'm sure they will. So thanks everyone, and we'll see you. It comes around very quickly. We'll see you this time next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.